Good evening. I'm Jade Hamilton. That lovely lady is Ila Golden, and welcome to the vlog. So, as Ila mentioned in our previous collaboration, we are going to be talking about diversity in form and media today, with particular reference, oh my goodness, this sounds like a uni essay, to video games, which is something that ILA absolutely adores. So if there's anybody from EA or one of the game developers watching this, it's cool, because I'm sure she'd love it. And we're also going to talk about audio drama, because that is my particular métier.
And we may also make some references to theatre as well, because that has very similar themes to everything else.
Yeah, that kind of meets in the middle, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's sort of surprising almost just how much, these two areas sort of have in common. You wouldn't think that audio drama and video games would have very much in common at all, but there is a lot of weird middle ground, and theatre kind of comes into that middle ground as well. So, and I think, I know Jade sort of mentioned the idea of EA, but I think I'd much rather an indie. And I think that's one of the things about video games, is there's a lot of the indie game developers, and there's a lot of, it's not necessarily through the whole big studio thing. There are a lot of independent people who sort of do it. And I think one of the things that sort of bring these two wildly different areas of storytelling together is the fact that a lot of people very much overlook them in terms of what they can offer in terms of storytelling.
Because they dismiss video games as kid stuff, and audio as old people stuff, and they kind of miss the boat in terms of what you can do with video games. You've got such an expansive palette, and you can do so much with. If you look at things like Undertale, for instance, and things like this, you have these wonderful, rich palettes that you're working with. But equally with audio drama, because you have such a limited thing, you've got sound effects, you've got dialogue, you've got music. That's it. But with that, you can do such amazing things. The most obvious example being The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The amount of stuff that's in that thing. Really, all it is sound effects, music, and voices. And yet, you zip all over space. You have talking books. You have fish talking about philosophy. You have all sorts of random things. And it's all perfectly feasible. And unlike with film, you haven't got some poor director wringing their hands and going, "But we haven't got the budget for that."
No, because I think that's the thing about both these as genres and as mediums. For the independents, yes, there is, considerable startup fees and whatever else, but they are achievable on a much lower budget than something like you said, like filmmaking, for example. And the sort of risk reward ratio is
Exactly.
something that's completely different to any other genre, really, or any other medium.
Speaking as somebody who is trying to get stuff funded and cut things at the moment, and also with audio, you have a much greater chance of possibly getting some really good people working with you, which is part of the attraction for me. I mean, audio for me is wonderful because I am a bit of an actor obsessive. I love British actors of a certain vintage. People like Jeremy Irons and Juliet Stevenson and Alex Jennings and Penelope Wilton, and the list goes on. And being able to have people like that, because I mean, even a big radio drama like mine, because mine is 3 episodes, it takes 6 days to record. A film, even a little indie film, can take 6 months. And that's if you're lucky. So, you have a much smaller timescale, which paradoxically means that if you're lucky, you might get somebody really brilliant.
Yeah. And again, like we said before, it's a medium that gets very heavily overlooked. And I think a lot of people think it's a medium that's sort of dying out, and yet audio.
And a lot of
No, you go with what you're saying.
And a lot of writers tend to see it, if they see it as anything at all, they see it as a CV filler. In the same way that some do video games, I think. They see it as something to fill a gap while they get on with other serious stuff. And you think, no, but whatever.
I don't think people see the video games quite so much like that anymore, because I think it as a genre has sort of, everybody will play a type of video game, or they'll be aware of certain types of video games. What people don't tend to take seriously with video games is it as a format for storytelling. It's only really been in the last few years where games have sort of broken through, which have kind of completely changed people's expectations of what a story is and how you as a player can participate in and appreciate that story. That we've kind of started getting people thinking about video games in a completely different way and as a medium for telling stories, even though video games have pretty much always told stories, even if the stories have sort of been very, very basic to begin with. And, it's just becoming more complex and more expansive, and we're at the point now where people need to be taking it more seriously as a form of storytelling, because it's very much sort of where storytelling is kind of moving to. But at the same time, formats like the older formats, whether it's the visual ones or the audible ones, they're never going to go away. They're just going to be experienced in new ways. And I think people aren't realizing just how much we are listening to stories more than we are, watching stories, because, sites like Audible have suddenly blown up out of nowhere. So there is definitely a market there, but that market isn't being utilized quite as well as it should be at the moment. And I think that therein sort of lies the difference between the two, whereas audio dramas are taken seriously as storytelling, they're not taken seriously as a modern form of storytelling, even though there is definitely a market there for it. The market just doesn't know that it's there. Whereas video games, there is a market for it, but people aren't taking it seriously as a form of storytelling.
I mean, there are exceptions. I mean, the wonderful novelist Naomi Alderman, as well as writing some brilliant novels, Disobedience, The Lessons, The Liar's Gospel, has also written Zombies Run, which is a game that is meant to keep you fit, but is also about the zombie apocalypse. Those things go together, obviously.
Of course.
Yeah. And she loves video games, and she has talked at length about how she loves video games as a form of narrative, as a form of interactive narrative, which again is where audio drama comes in, because audio drama of itself is a form of interactive narrative. Because you've got so little in terms of what I, as a writer, am actually putting there, your imagination is filling in the gap. And in that sense, it is an interactive narrative. You don't know what Adelaide, for example, looks like unless I tell you. So you're having to fill in what she looks like based on the one or two details I do give you.
No, I completely agree. That makes total sense. And as we sort of mentioned briefly, theatre kind of falls into that same sort of branch category.
Exactly.
Because the idea being that you could go to see the same play by the same actors 2 nights in a row, but you're not going to get the same performance both nights. Yes, the basic story is going to be the same, and yes, the lines are going to probably be the same, but they might be delivered slightly differently. There might be a slight different emphasis on a particular word depending on how the actor is feeling at that particular moment in time, because human beings are fallible. They're not, designed to copy, paste, repeat a performance. It's not like a film. There are always going to be subtle differences every single time you go, and that kind of makes it a living media. And I think that's what these three things are: video games and audio dramas and theatre. They're living media because they require a certain level of input. They're not, copy, paste, repeat. Yes, 2 different gamers may sit down and play the exact same game, but they're not going to have the exact same experience playing those games.
I have somewhere, I've now got it on download, but many, many years ago, I used to have a cassette tape of the playwright Willie Russell reading his play Shirley Valentine. And at the beginning of the play, he says, and I've got it almost off by heart, he says, back in Shakespeare's day, they didn't really have much stage scenery, and the parts of women were, of course, played by men, a bit like tonight. And Shakespeare would often have a character like Prologue in Henry V, who would come on and say to the audience that we need to borrow your imagination. So with the help of your imagination and this bottle of Ribena that I've got here, coming disguised as Chateau de Georges 1985, we might just get there. And he started reading Shirley Valentine. And I can remember listening to that and thinking, that's exactly right. That's what, as a playwright, you need to do. And particularly if you're working in audio, you need to kind of borrow people's imagination. And I think now our imaginations are encouraged to be a little bit lazy because we are so swamped by visual storytelling or storytelling. There's nothing wrong with visual storytelling, but a lot of the visual storytelling we've got at the moment tends to do a lot of it for us, which is a bit of a shame, because, you know, our imagination, it's like any muscle. You use it or you lose it. And that, I think, is where things like video games and theatre and audio drama can come in. They let your imagination do a little bit of work. They let it work the flat off.
Definitely. And obviously certain ones more than others, and certain ones in different ways to others. But they're all genres which are still evolving. They're all genres which are they've still got a lot to offer, and there are so many exciting possibilities for where they're going and what they can do. It's just about looking at them in different ways, and people are starting to, for theatre and for video games, definitely, people are starting to look at them in different ways. And audio drama just needs to catch up, and hopefully you'll be at the forefront, or at least part of this movement, to bring audio drama
from your mouth to God's ears, my love.
Sorry?
From your mouth to God's ears.
We can only hope.
But I think it's also about matching up the story that you're telling with the medium that you're using to tell it in, and also stretching the medium a little bit. So, for example, I'm going to use Undertale again, because that's one of the few video games that I know quite a bit about. One of the things that the creators of Undertale wanted to do with that was take those fantasy role-playing games that people were used to and stretch them a little bit and sort of tease them out and twiddle with the conventions and just kind of see what happened. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with The Smallest Words and with Adelaide. I wanted to push things. I wanted to push myself, but I wanted to push the medium. I thought it would be kind of fun to have a character who was the central character of a story who didn't really speak much, who couldn't really speak much, and who didn't use voiceover. Because a lot of characters who don't speak in audio drama, people use voiceover, and to me that feels a bit like cheating. Because in the real world, if you've got a character that has communication difficulties, you don't get a nice, convenient voiceover going, this is what I'm thinking and this is what I'm feeling. It doesn't work like that.
If only, it would make life so much easier. But it doesn't work like that. But I know from what I know of the story and what I know about the character, that she goes from almost no words to very telegraphic sort of speech. But not having that.
For those of us who haven't got a linguistics background, telegraphic speech is the kind of speech your average 2.5-year-old child might use. So things like, to use a very famous example from the Genie case, which is a real life case of a feral child who was knocked away, a little bit like Adelaide, in a similar circumstance. She used to say things like applesauce by store. Now, you know what that means. You can get what that message is, but it's not a sentence.
But the way you sort of develop the character through the story and her sort of speech development, as limited as it is almost kind of a metaphor for what you're doing with the series as a whole. The idea of bringing about this sort of change in the media and in the way we sort of absorb language and whatever else, and the way we sort of think about it.
Thank you. That's a lovely compliment.
Well, I do try.
I wanted to make her speech development very organic. I didn't want to cheat. I didn't want her to go from 0 to 60. Mm-hmm. I'm on episode 2 now, and Adelaide is, saying a few more words. She can say book and things, she's gradually building up, but I mean, even with her, when her speech gets to its fullest extent, she will still rely a lot on noises, a lot on vocal tone, a lot on... And rule number 1 as an audio dramatist is that you treat your audience like they've got a brain. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I wanted to do with Addie. I wanted the audience to help me do a little bit of the work. And because I think they'll be able to work it out. I think they'll be able to go, oh, she's saying this in this way, so that must mean that she's feeling X. Mm-hmm. In the same way they would do with any other character. Because that's what we do as human beings when we decode language. We don't just look at the words people are using. We, look at vocal tone and breath. Mm-hmm.
It's the whole
of things that tell exactly. I can remember though talking to my mum about the plot of The Smallest Words and telling her that I had a lead character in this audio drama who didn't actually speak, and bless her, her eyes went wide and she looked at me like I was slightly doolally. And she said, but love, how are you going to manage that? And I thought,
you've been doing it for long enough. The silent protagonist in video games is a trope.
But in audio drama, people sort of think that because you've got nothing else, that your characters have basically got to sit there and jabber away, and that's not the case. Silence and limited language can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I know.
And that's the thing about Addie, because her language is so limited. What she says holds a lot of power, in the same way that children who have very limited language can hold a lot of power, because their utterances are very meant. And anyone who's seen an 18-month-old child stand in the middle of a room and say no knows exactly what I mean. So, I wanted to give her that power and that agency. Because when I switched over because originally it was told from her adoptive father's point of view, from Felix's point of view, I'm thinking of doing another part of the Addiverse in which I try that at some point, just to see if it will tell me anything more, because I think it might. But the interesting thing about swapping it over was that Adelaide was given so much agency in the context of the drama because of the way I had to write it in order to fit in with the conventions of the medium and still say what I wanted to say. So, you have scenes with Joy where her adopted mum, before Adelaide was adopted, where Adelaide will be chatting away to her dad, and then all of a sudden her mum will walk in and Adelaide is completely silent, just completely blanks her mother. And that says more than a whole stream of words, a whole stream of kicking and screaming and teenage, you're the worst mum in the world and I hate you, ever could.
Yeah, definitely.
Time's getting on, so thank you so much for coming on, Ila, my love. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And
It's been a
I
pleasure
would
being
love
here.
to do this again.
Yes, definitely.
And those of you who like this, please like, please subscribe, and please share. Until next time.
Wait, and those of you who haven't watched the other half of this on my channel, go watch that.
And until next time, my loves, cheerio.
See ya.